The boardroom went dead silent as Daniel slid the report across the polished table. Pages skidded to a stop right in front of the CFO. My chest tightened before I even saw the cover sheet. I knew that report. I had flagged the numbers in it 3 separate times. This is Revenge Room. If this is the first time you are seeing our video, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Emily signed off on the final pricing structure, Daniel said, his voice calm, almost bored. Every head in the room turned toward me. 12 faces. 12 sets of eyes. My stomach dropped through the floor because that pricing had just caused a $12.4 million loss. And I had never approved it. Not once. Not in any version. Not on any day did I open my mouth to speak, to defend myself, to explain, but the CFO leaned forward and cut me off cold. Is this true, Emily? Daniel didn't even look at me. He was staring at the wall behind my head like the answer was already written there. He knew exactly what was coming. He had built this moment, brick by brick, for months, and in that one frozen second I finally understood what was happening. This wasn't a mistake. I had just been set up 0.3 months earlier. Daniel had pulled me into his office and offered me what he called a growth opportunity. He wanted me to lead negotiations on a failing logistics contract with a company called Brightline Freight. The deal was a mess. 2 senior managers had already crashed and burned trying to fix it. No raise yet, he said, smiling that practiced smile of his. No new title either. But prove yourself on this one, Emily, and we'll talk about the director track. I remember walking out of his office feeling chosen. Feeling seen. I was 31 years old and I had been at the firm for 6 years, grinding through every late night, every messy account, every impossible client. This felt like the door finally opening. I told my mom that night over the phone. She said she was proud. I told my best friend Priya the next morning over coffee. She raised her eyebrow but congratulated me anyway. Now, sitting at my kitchen table months later, I could see it clearly. Daniel hadn't promoted me. He had positioned me. He picked the deal nobody else could save and handed it to the youngest person on the team. He didn't pick me to win. He picked me to fall. The contract pricing made no sense from day one. The margins were paper thin. The risk exposure was massive. Brightline wanted us to lock in fuel costs for 36 months while absorbing any rate hikes ourselves. Any first-year analyst would have flagged it. I flagged it the same afternoon I got the file. I built a clean spreadsheet showing the loss projections under 3 different fuel scenarios. Even the best case made the company bleed money by month 18. I walked the printout into Daniel's office and laid it on his desk. He didn't even pick it up. Stop overthinking this, Emily, he said, leaning back in his chair. You always do this. You analyze things to death. Just make the deal work. Brightline is a strategic relationship. Find the path. I tried again. I emailed him a written summary that night. He replied with one line, "Trust the process." But something felt wrong. The numbers weren't just bad. They were structured in a way that almost guaranteed failure. Like someone had reverse-engineered them to hit a specific loss target. I didn't know it yet, but that was exactly what someone had done. I went home that weekend and rebuilt the entire pricing model from scratch. I worked through Saturday and Sunday, ate cold pizza at my desk, and barely slept. By Monday morning, I had a revised model that was safe, profitable, and defensible. I uploaded it to the shared system at 7:30 Monday morning. I tagged Daniel. I tagged the finance team. I sent a follow-up email to be sure. 2 days later, on Wednesday afternoon, I logged back in to check the file before a client call. My version was gone, not deleted. Replaced. The file name was identical. The folder location was identical. The version history showed only one upload. But the numbers inside were the original disaster numbers, the ones I had warned about. And under the Approvals tab, where it listed who had signed off. My name, Emily Carter. Proved at 9:46 on Tuesday night. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I had been at my sister's birthday dinner Tuesday night. I hadn't touched my laptop. I had photos with timestamps to prove it. but the system said I had signed. I knocked on Daniel's open door the next morning. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. You changed the numbers on the Brightline file. He didn't even blink. He didn't look surprised or offended or confused. He just slowly turned his monitor toward me. Emily, you approved them. Look. There it was on his screen. The file. The approval log. My name. My credentials. A timestamp from Tuesday night. I never signed that, I said. I was at a family dinner. I have receipts. I have photos. Daniel sighed, the way a teacher sighs at a student who keeps getting the same problem wrong. Maybe you did it from your phone and forgot. You've been under a lot of pressure. Nobody's blaming you for the original analysis being conservative. We just needed the deal to move. My chest tightened. He wasn't fighting me. He wasn't denying anything. He was reframing it, making me sound forgetful, making me sound unstable. I walked back to my desk and sat down slowly. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, 'cause I had just realized something cold and clear. He wasn't going to admit anything. Ever. He was going to make me question myself instead. The next Brightline call was scheduled for that Friday. Client director on their side was a sharp woman named Adiz, and she had been flagging concerns for weeks. I had a strong working relationship with her. Or I thought I did. Halfway through the call, while we were reviewing the rate sheet, Adiz went quiet. Emily, she said carefully, these figures don't match what you sent me last week. The fuel adjustment clause is completely different. I froze. I hadn't sent her any new figures. I pulled up my sent folder while she kept talking. Nothing. No email to her in the last 9 days. Adiz, I said slowly, I didn't send you those. There was a long pause on the line. Kind of pause where you can hear someone deciding how much to say. Then someone is using your name, Emily. The email came from your address. It had your signature block. It even had that line you always use about the weather in Chicago. My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak for a second. She lowered her voice. Be careful. I don't know what's happening over there, but something is very wrong. After the call ended, I sat at my desk and stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't forgetting things. Someone was inside my account. I went straight to IT that afternoon and asked them to pull access logs for my account over the last 60 days. Technician, a quiet guy named Marcus, ran the report while I waited. When the printout came off the printer, my stomach turned over. There were dozens of logins I didn't recognize. Late nights. Weekends. 11 o'clock on a Sunday. 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. Always after my normal hours. Always after I had logged out for the day. Marcus, I said, pointing at the highlighted entries, these aren't me. I was asleep. I was at my sister's wedding rehearsal that Saturday. I can prove it. He scrolled through the IP addresses on his own screen. His face stayed flat. Emily, every single one of these came from your credentials. Same password. Same security questions answered correctly. The system has no way to flag that as suspicious. As far as our security tools are concerned, it's you. Can you trace the device? He hesitated. The metadata is stripped. Whoever did this knew how to clean it. That's not a casual hack. That's someone with admin-level access. He told me to file a formal report with HR. He told me they would look into it. But I could hear the doubt in his voice. Case was already closed in his mind. I stopped trusting the company system that same night. I drove home, opened my personal laptop, and created a new folder on my private cloud drive. From that point forward, every version of every spreadsheet I built, I saved twice. Once in the company system. Once on my personal drive with a date and a timestamp baked into the file name. It was a small decision. turned out to be the most important one I made. The next week, I built a revised pricing model for a smaller satellite contract attached to the Brightline deal. I uploaded it on a Thursday morning at 10:15. I saved my private copy at 10:16. By Friday afternoon, the version in the company system had been altered again. The discount tier was changed. The fuel clause was rewritten. And my name sat right there in the approval field as if I had personally walked it through. But this time I had something I didn't have before. I had the original, untouched, sitting safe on my personal drive with a timestamp the company couldn't reach. This wasn't random anymore. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't me forgetting things. This was a coordinated, methodical, repeated pattern of fraud. And whoever was doing it had been doing it for months. Daniel started looping executives into Brightline updates over the next 2 weeks. He did it casually, like an afterthought, dropping their names into emails I was copied on. Just keeping leadership in the loop. Emily's handling final approvals on this one. He said it the same way every time. Same wording. Same tone. Like it had always been the plan. Like everyone already knew. Like I had volunteered. I never had. In one meeting with the COO, Daniel said it again, almost in passing. Emily owns the Brightline pricing. The COO nodded and moved on. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked when I had taken that on. But it stuck. Once executives heard it 3 or 4 times, it became fact. Became history. And suddenly, every risky decision on that deal traced back to me. Every aggressive concession. Every weird clause. My name was on it. My approvals were logged. My signature was in the system. Daniel had built a paper trail in plain sight, and he had used my own credentials to do it. I started to feel sick walking into the office. I started waking up at 4 in the morning with my heart pounding. My mom asked if I was eating. I lied and said yes. Trap was almost finished. The leadership meeting was on a Tuesday morning. 22 people in the room, including the CEO and the entire executive team. Daniel ran point on the Brightline update. He clicked through the slides smoothly. Margins. Volume. Risk exposure. Then he turned to me in front of everyone. Emily, you've been close to these numbers. Are you confident in them? The room went still. I could feel the air change. 20 pairs of eyes settled on me. The numbers on the screen weren't mine. They had never been mine. I had warned against them, written against them, built alternatives to them. But the system showed I had approved them. And if I said no in this room in front of these people, I would look like someone who didn't even know what she had signed. I hesitated. A full 3 seconds. I felt sweat prickle at the back of my neck. Yes, I said. The numbers reflect the agreed framework. Daniel nodded approvingly and moved to the next slide. The CFO made a note on his pad. The CEO checked his phone. Nobody saw what had just happened. Nobody saw the trap snap shut on my ankle. I had just publicly endorsed numbers I knew were wrong. Daniel had needed that on record. And now he had it. After that meeting, things shifted. Subtly at first. Then sharply. I stopped getting added to Brightline strategy emails. The weekly internal sync about the deal disappeared from my calendar. When I asked Daniel about it, he smiled and said the team was just streamlining. You don't need to be in the weeds on every conversation, Emily. You're the final approver. That's a higher altitude role. But I wasn't approving anything. I wasn't seeing the changes. I wasn't being looped into the negotiations with Adiz's team. I was just a name. A name attached to whatever paperwork showed up later. Took me a few days to understand what he had done. He had stripped away every piece of actual control I had. No emails, so I couldn't track decisions. No meetings, so I couldn't push back. No drafts, so I couldn't compare versions. But he had kept my name on the approval line. It was the perfect setup. Responsibility without authority. Accountability without information. The exact position any lawyer or auditor would call indefensible. I started keeping a private journal at home. Every conversation. Every weird email. Every meeting I should have been in but wasn't. Dates. Times. Names. I didn't know yet why I was doing it. I just knew I would need it. 2 weeks before the boardroom meeting, I went back to the access logs. Marcus from IT had given me a copy when I first complained, and I had been studying them late at night. Most of the suspicious logins came from a generic internal IP range, the kind shared by hundreds of employees. Useless for tracking. But buried near the bottom of one report was a different kind of entry. A secondary admin permission tag. It wasn't a login. It was an access elevation. Something that allowed a user to override file permissions and edit approval records without triggering the standard audit trail. Tag was linked to an account belonging to Daniel's executive assistant, a woman named Brielle. I knew Brielle. She was friendly, efficient, always had Daniel's coffee order memorized. She had been with him for almost 4 years, longer than she'd been with the company. She had followed him from his last firm. I dug deeper. Her account had override permissions on the entire Brightline folder. Full editing rights. The ability to alter approval signatures. No audit trail attached because admin-level activity from her tier didn't get logged the same way. That's when it clicked. Daniel hadn't been logging in as me. He hadn't needed to. He'd had Brielle do it. Her access was clean. Her access didn't show. But her access had a fingerprint. I just had to find a way to lift it. The boardroom. The accusation. The stairs. Daniel sat across from me, posture relaxed, hands folded. He looked like a man delivering bad news, not a man who had just lit my career on fire. Emily approved everything, he said again, calmly, for the room. The CFO turned back to me. His name was Hadrian Voss, a serious man with silver hair and a reputation for not blinking during negotiations. Emily, did you or did you not sign off on the final Brightline pricing structure? This was the moment. I could feel it. The whole rest of my life balanced on the next sentence. If I said yes, I owned the loss. $12.4 million. My career was finished, maybe my reference too. I'd be lucky to find work again in this industry. If I said no, I looked like someone who didn't even know what was in her own approval log. Someone unstable. Someone unreliable. The result would be the same. Maybe worse. There was no good answer. Daniel had built a question with no exit. But there was a third option. The one he hadn't planned for. Truth, told carefully, with the door left open just wide enough for me to walk through later. I took a breath. I approved a different version, I said. The room shifted. A few executives glanced at each other. The CFO's eyebrows rose just slightly. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the picture of disappointed patience. Emily, that's not what the system shows. The system shows your signature. Your timestamp. Your credentials. I know what the system shows, I said. That's exactly the problem. Kept my voice level. I didn't accuse. I didn't shout. I had practiced this in my head for 2 weeks, walking laps around my apartment late at night. I'm not denying the file has my name on it. I'm saying the file in the system is not the file I created. I have my own copies. With timestamps. With my actual numbers. Daniel's face stayed calm, but I caught the flicker. A tiny tightening at the jaw. He hadn't expected me to push back like this. With respect, Emily, he said, the company system is the system of record. Personal copies aren't admissible in an internal review. The CFO nodded slowly. He wasn't on my side. He was on the side of process. And process said the system was right. We'll need to take this offline, Hadrian said. Emily, please remain available. That was corporate language for something much colder than it sounded. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I had been suspended. HR called me into a small conference room on the 5th floor. A woman I had only met twice handed me a single piece of paper. The word suspension was printed in bold near the top, followed by phrases like pending investigation and without prejudice. "This isn't a termination," she said gently, like that was supposed to comfort me. "It's just protocol while the investigation runs its course." She didn't make eye contact when she said it. They walked me back to my desk. 2 security guards stood 10 feet away while I packed a small bag of personal items. A framed photo of my parents. Coffee mug Priya had given me for my last birthday. A small succulent I had named Albert. I handed in my laptop. I handed in my badge. I handed in my parking pass. The walk through the lobby felt longer than it had ever felt. People I had worked with for years pretended not to see me. One woman, a junior analyst named Tommy, gave me a quick, sympathetic look. Nobody else even glanced up. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time before I could turn the key. My career felt over. My name felt poisoned. That was what they wanted me to feel. They thought it was finished. They were wrong. I drove home in a fog. I sat on my couch with my coat still on. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry yet. I just felt empty in a deep, hollow way I had never felt before. Then, around 6 in the evening, I made myself stand up. I made myself walk to my desk. I opened my personal laptop, the one Daniel had never touched, and I logged into my private cloud drive. Folder after folder, file after file, it was all there. Every version of the Brightline pricing I had ever built. Every revision. Every timestamp baked into every file name. Months of work, saved in parallel in a place no admin override could reach. But it wasn't just the spreadsheets. About 4 months ago, when the file changes first started, I had downloaded a free screen recording program. I hadn't trusted what was happening. So whenever I worked on Brightline files, I had hit record. I opened the folder labeled Sessions. There were dozens of recordings. Hours and hours of footage. Me building the actual pricing models. Me uploading them. Me logging out cleanly each time. Hard, visual, time-stamped proof of what I had really done. I felt something I hadn't felt all day. I felt sharp. I watched the recordings late into the night, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. First dozen showed exactly what I expected. Me working honestly, building safe models, logging out at reasonable hours. But around recording number 8, something caught my eye. I had to rewind it twice to be sure. While I was working in the file, the cursor flickered. Just for a second. It moved on its own, hovered over a cell, and clicked. Then froze, then resumed normal behavior as my own cursor took back over. I checked the next recording. Same thing. A flicker. A ghost movement. Someone else in real time watching what I was doing. Remote access. Live. Someone had been logged in alongside me, observing while I built my models. They had been watching me work. Then, after I logged out, they had gone in and changed everything. My hands went cold. This wasn't just file tampering. This was surveillance. They had been monitoring my work in real time, learning exactly when to overwrite, exactly what to change, exactly how to make it look like me. The recordings showed the cursor flickers clearly. They showed me logging out. They showed the time on my system clock. But they didn't show who was on the other end. They didn't show the face. They didn't name the user. I had proof I was being watched. I didn't yet have proof of who was doing the watching. I needed an ally. I called Adiz the next morning. My voice shook a little when she picked up. I told her everything. The original numbers. The overrides. The fake emails sent under my name. Cursor flickers. The suspension. She listened without interrupting for almost 20 minutes. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. I could hear her breathing slowly, the way people breathe when they're choosing their next move carefully. "Emily," she finally said, "if even half of what you're telling me is true, your company just committed contract fraud against my company. Multiple times. In writing. With my signature on the receiving end." My pulse spiked. "I know. That's not just an internal HR matter. That's a legal exposure for both sides. Can you prove it?" I asked. "Because I have my versions and my recordings, but the company system shows me as the approver. I need someone outside the building who can see what I can't." She was quiet for another moment. "Send me everything you have. Every file. Every recording. Every email log. I need to bring this to our legal team. We may have access to something on our end that you don't even know exists." "What do you mean?" "Server-side records," she said. "I'll explain when I see what you have." I hung up and started compiling. I worked on the report for 2 straight days. I barely slept. I ordered food and forgot to eat it. Priya called twice and I let it go to voicemail. I built it like an analyst, not like an angry person. Cold, factual, organized. No accusations. No emotions. Just data. Section 1. Timeline of events from the day I was assigned to Brightline to the day I was suspended. Every key date. Every meeting. Section 2. File comparisons. My original versions on the left. The altered system versions on the right. Color-coded changes. Differences highlighted. Section 3. Access logs. Every suspicious login with the dates and times when I could prove I was somewhere else. Wedding photos, restaurant receipts, calendar invites. Section 4. Screen recordings. Edited down to the cursor flicker moments. Time-stamped. Annotated. Section 5. The override permission tied to Brielle's account with the audit trail gap. I compiled the whole thing into a single password-protected folder. 47 files. Hundreds of pages. Then I sent it directly to the email Adiz had given me, the one for Brightline's outside legal counsel. I clicked send at 11:47 on a Thursday night. Then I sat on my kitchen floor and finally let myself cry. For 2 days, nothing happened. I checked my email every 20 minutes. I checked my phone constantly. I jumped every time it buzzed. Nothing came back. Not from Adiz. Not from the legal team. Not from anyone. On the 3rd morning, I got an email from my company's HR department. The subject line read Investigation Update. My hand shook as I opened it. The message was short. 3 sentences. The investigation had reviewed the available evidence. The available evidence was inconclusive. My personal files were not considered admissible under company policy because they had been stored outside approved systems. The investigation would continue, but no immediate findings supported my claims. My heart sank straight through the floor. Daniel had thought of this. Of course he had. He had built the entire trap inside the company system, knowing the company system would be the only evidence considered. My personal copies, my recordings, my journal, all of it was being filed away as the suspicious behavior of a stressed, defensive employee trying to cover her own mistakes. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall for an hour. I genuinely thought it was over. I had given them everything I had. And it hadn't been enough. Then, at 4:17 that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Adiz. "Emily," she said, "we checked something you didn't have access to." I sat up straight. "What do you mean?" "Server-side backups. Every time your company sent us a file or an email, our systems automatically archived a copy on our end. Independent of your company. Untouchable from your side. Read only on our side. Locked, time-stamped, and verified." I couldn't breathe. Our IT team pulled the originals of every Brightline document that came in over the last 6 months. Then we ran a comparison against the versions you sent us in your report. The internal originals, the ones with your name on them, are different from the ones our backups received. By a lot. How is that possible? Because someone was using a special override channel inside your company to modify documents after they were created. Our backup captures the document at the moment it leaves your network. The override happens after that. So our copy and your copy don't match. She paused. And Emily, our IT team, traced the override pattern. Same admin chain. Every time. Linked to one user with elevated permissions and one supervisor account authorizing the access. Whose? Daniel Reeves. Your boss. With his executive assistant Brielle as the action user. My heart was pounding. I gripped the phone with both hands. What happens now? Now, Adiz said quietly. We make some phone calls. Brightline froze the entire deal 48 hours later. $12.4 million in losses became $12.4 million in suspended payments. They issued a formal notice to my company demanding a full internal investigation, with their legal team copied on every step. They wanted answers within 72 hours. My company panicked. The CEO called an emergency meeting. The board hired an outside audit firm to come in immediately. Forensic specialists. People who knew where to look. I heard about all of it secondhand through Priya, who knew someone in finance. She called me late at night, whispering like the walls could hear her. Emily, the whole place is on fire. They're pulling every system log. They're interviewing everyone. Daniel hasn't been at his desk in 2 days. He hasn't. He's been holed up with the legal team. People are saying his assistant cried in the bathroom yesterday. Nobody's allowed to talk about it, but everybody is. I sat in my apartment and listened. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just listened. 'Cause I knew what was coming next. The same kind of meeting Daniel had built for me, the one designed to corner someone with no exit, was now being built around him. And he had no personal backups to save him. No secret recordings. No outside ally with server-side proof. He had only the system. And the system had finally turned. 2 weeks later, I was called back into the building. Same boardroom. Same long polished table. Same skyline view through the windows. But this time the seats were rearranged. Adiz sat at one end with 2 lawyers on either side of her. The CEO sat at the other. The CFO was beside him. Outside auditors flanked the walls. Daniel sat alone, halfway down one side, his tie loose, his face pale. Brielle wasn't in the room. Adiz opened her folder calmly. Based on independent server-side records held by Brightline Freight, she began, we can confirm that the pricing approvals submitted by this company were not authorized by Emily Carter. She slid a thick stack of paper across the table. They were generated through an internal override channel under the credentials of Brielle Marston, with executive authorization granted by Daniel Reeves. We have the access logs. We have the approval chains. We have the timestamps. The room was perfectly silent. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind that presses on your ears. The CFO turned slowly toward Daniel. The CEO didn't move at all, but his expression shifted in a way that was somehow more frightening than shouting. Daniel, the CFO said softly. Would you like to respond? Daniel tried. I'll give him that. He opened his mouth. He started a sentence. He stopped. He started another one. His voice came out thin and unsteady, nothing like the calm, controlled tone he'd used in this same room 3 weeks earlier. It's more complicated than the documents suggest. There were multiple parties involved in the approval chain, and I want to be clear, Emily was looped into every. It isn't complicated, the CFO cut in. His voice was flat and cold. The records are clear. Your override was used. Your authorization triggered the access. Your assistant executed the changes. There is nothing complicated here. Daniel went silent. He stared at the table. Two members of corporate security entered through the side door. They didn't shout. They didn't grab anyone. They simply stood, one on each side of Daniel's chair, and waited. He stood up slowly. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He gathered his portfolio and his coffee cup with shaking hands. The same room where he had tried to walk me out professionally with my career in pieces was now the room walking him out instead. The same long polished table. The same heavy door. Only this time it was him being escorted through it. I didn't smile. I didn't feel happy. I felt something quieter than happiness. I felt clear. HR called me 3 days later. The same woman who had handed me the suspension paper now sounded warm and apologetic on the phone. Emily, your position is fully reinstated. We'd love to welcome you back as soon as possible. Your title, your salary, everything is restored. We can also discuss compensation for the time and stress involved. I held the phone for a long moment. No, thank you, I said. There was a pause. I'm sorry. I won't be coming back as an employee, but I'd be willing to discuss returning as an independent consultant. A new contract. My terms. My name clearly listed as the lead on any project I touch. She started to negotiate. I stayed quiet and let her work it out with leadership. A week later, I walked back through the front lobby of that building. Same marble floor. Same security desk. Same elevator I had walked out of with my succulent in a cardboard box. But this time I had my own badge. My own contract. My own conditions signed by the CEO himself. As I passed the boardroom on the executive floor, I paused for a second and looked through the glass. Daniel hadn't just tried to blame me. He had built an entire system designed to erase me. To make my work look like his, my judgment look like his mistakes, my career look like his stepping stone. But systems leave records. Servers keep backups. Cursors flicker. And records, in the end, don't lie.